Hey guys, just checking in. I'm gonna today. Gonna go over tonight. I'm gonna go over the story, "The Man from the Train." This is something I really think people would be interested in, and really has a lot to teach us about crime, about these true crime cases that we're looking into, about the way evidence is handled, the way eyewitness testimony is unreliable. It's a fascinating case. Now, we were supposed to be doing, I'm going to talk for a few minutes. Before I go into that, we'll just see if anybody checks in live. But we were supposed to be doing an interview tonight with retired officer Al Mintz. And when we went to set up the live stream to connect all these things, it was told we had to wait 24 hours. So it's postponed. The interview with Al Mintz is postponed until tomorrow at 7:06. We'll call it 7 o'clock, but I think it's 7:06 that we're technically we'll be able to connect all those and get on. And so Al is a fantastic. He's someone that I wish we could meet him live in person in the same room. This guy's, when you look at the way he's conducted himself in his life, in his brief but illustrious police career for the Providence Police Department, this guy's a real hero. So we'll see if anybody else comes on. Hey, Ranger Joe. The shades have become kind of my thing, Ranger Joe. But the reason I wear them is because I don't know if I can show you these, but there's a bunch of lights here that make things visible. And after about a minute or two, my eyes start kind of blinking. So I can start out without them, but eventually you'll see me start to blink and shit. So, I'm already starting a little bit. So I'll have to put the shades back in. Sorry about that. It doesn't mean I'm trying to hide something from you guys, like I'm being sneaky or something like that. It also doesn't mean that I think I'm Bono. It just means my eyes start blinking from these spotlights. Actually, it was funny. So a couple weeks ago, I did a show from the kitchen where there was a lot of natural light, and because of that, I didn't need the shades. And a couple people sent me messages like, "Dude, put the shades back on." So that's the closest thing to a mask that I have is the shades. Hey, Tom Fleming, thank you very much for coming in. I just got off the phone with Dave. And unfortunately, we were not able to, for tonight, we wanted to do this live, and YouTube required us to do. That's not the Joseph Mitchell, is it? Holy shit. Hey, Joseph. Is that Joe Mitchell from Worcester? My old basketball friend? Anyway, say Joseph, if you're not, if you have a great name, and thanks for joining us. Wow, that's how good to see you, man. This kid could dunk a basketball. I doubt he can now. But yeah, so apparently it takes 24 hours before you can get this set up. Okay. Yeah, sorry, Turtle Boy. I'm glad you came on though, because I have to be just I don't know if you watched my show earlier. I had a little bit of I had to be actually I need to contact you on the side, Turtle Boy, because I had something that I want to tell you, but I can't say it publicly. So I want to be able to share information, but I'm not going to go with names and things like that unless I can verify it. But I can run them by you and see what you think, because this is some really good inside information. But tonight we were supposed to be interviewing Al Mintz, who is a retired police detective from Providence. He was a Vietnam veteran from Jacksonville, Florida, that after the war joined the police department in Providence. He advanced very rapidly and became the lead detective on a bunch of high-profile cases involving disappearing children in the late 70s. And this is something that my partner Dave McGrath, who has written the book Monster: The Life and Crimes of Wayne Chapman. I think Dave is on the verge of breaking something really, really big. And I want to get him hooked up with Turtle Boy, actually, because Dave's got the research and he's got the book and he's got a national following on his Spotify podcast of several 100,000. But Turtle Boy has the local following. I mean, he's got that locked up. So those last few, what he's really looking for is to get the word out there so the tips can come pouring in. He just got a new big break today that came in from Lawrence. One of the big cases that got us involved with this was the disappearance of Andy Puglisi in Lawrence. This was in 1976. I was 9 years old and I'm from Lawrence. I was about a mile from there. And it was a strange case where they brought in the National Guard, they brought in the Green Berets, there was helicopters searching overhead day and night. And then after 6 days, the police made this unbelievable announcement where they said, we believe Andy is safe with friends or family somewhere. And basically everybody stopped worrying. So the whole investigation pretty much shut down. Life went on. A couple weeks later, we were all back in school. I can say that the way we were back then as kids, I'm 57. Our parents were not aware of what was out there in terms of monsters. So we had the range of the city as long as we were home by supper. And even then, after that, you could go out again. Well, there were monsters out there and they were hunting kids, especially in places like Lawrence and Worcester, but also Fitchburg. Any place that was attached to 495 in particular, these guys were ranging up and down and they could steal a kid. And then if they killed him, just get off the highway somewhere else and dump the body. So a lot of these kids disappeared. These guys knew where to hunt in the cities because back then there were a lot more kids. Families were larger. Parents couldn't track their kids. So Andy Puglisi disappeared in 1976. It's never been solved. His body was never found, but there are an incredible number of twists when it comes to the suspects involved in it. Melanie Perkins was his childhood sweetheart, and she went on to work in broadcasting for the BBC. Not for the BBC, I'm sorry, PBS, and shows like American Experience. Well, when she reached the age of 30, she said, I want to put my contacts and my skills together to make my own documentary. So the thing that had always haunted her was the connection to what happened to her friend, Andy Puglisi, her sweetheart. It was like her first crush. And she was one of the last people to speak to Andy. He disappeared from a public swimming pool, and it looks like somebody came from the woods and brought him out. There was right behind the public swimming. They lived in the projects. Right next to the projects was a public swimming pool. Right behind it was a stretch of woods. And I've been down there, and it's strangely, even though it doesn't look that big from the air, the way the hills are, it's a very secluded spot. And beyond that is a highway. You can actually see and hear the trucks passing through. But the year before that, the main suspect, Wayne Chapman, who is connected to Providence, and that's what Al Mintz is going to come on and speak with us about. And because he eventually handled the case for much of these cases that were connected to Wayne Chapman. And Wayne Chapman was the main monster. That's the topic in Dave McGrath's book. So Wayne Chapman, the year before, had used the same technique. He came to the pool. He had been, stalking these kids for weeks down there. And Wayne Chapman was 6'4", I think, 220, big dude. And Wayne said, Wayne used a variety of tricks to get these kids. And the big one was his dog trick. He said, I need help finding my dog. I'll give you $5. So he took two boys into the woods. So that was in 75 for that one. He raped them violently. Obviously, any rape is violent, but it was a violent rape. Then he walked the kids out of the woods on Route 114 near a bowling alley and let them go. Well, so he got away with it. But strangely, he comes back a year later. If he was involved, he definitely was involved. But the thing about these cases that Dave is trying to break wide open, and also Melanie Perkins. Now, they both independently researching this for years have come to the same pretty incredible conclusion. I'm not fully convinced yet, but the fact that both of these two highly respected researchers have come to this conclusion, and some of the evidence that I saw in Dave's book really, really moved the needle for me. So what they're saying is that these predators were working together as accomplices on these cases. Some of them met at Bridgewater State Hospital. That was kind of like college for pedophiles, where you go and get your master's. Some of them met before that, though. And one of the guys connected to this group was a guy named Nathaniel Barjona, or that's eventually what he took on as his name. And he's from Worcester. And you guys, I'm sure everybody from Worcester has heard the stories about Barjona. And all these guys became friends, and they were all working together. There's connections from Barjona to Lawrence, too. And so he may have been involved in that case. So what happened with Wayne Chapman was a month after Andy disappeared. Now, Wayne had been raping kids by the dozen all his life. starting at an early age. So I think at this point he was around 30 years old. He gets pulled over on the highway in New York State by New York State troopers. He was driving this creepy converted bread truck. And inside, what he had was just a nightmare. So on the seat and on the dashboard, he had sexually compromising pictures of boys, naked boys and stuff. Now, I don't know if these were, it was probably a combination of photos he took and stuff that he obtained, because these guys were all trading these things. Inside the back of this converted bread truck, he had fake police badges. He had rolls of child porn. He had a starter's pistol that he would use, I presumably, to abduct kids. He had handcuffs. He had tape. He also had a homemade audio tape that he made while stalking a school bus. And I'm not sure. I've heard both ways, that this school bus was in Worcester and that it was in Lawrence. Because like I said, these guys work both. So you might, if there's anybody on this channel that was in this, that is in their 50s, that was in school in the 70s, they could have been on that school bus. And this guy, and they played this audio tape years later on the Oprah Winfrey show. But it was just a horrific tape where this guy's getting all aroused and talking about what he would do inside that school bus if he got let loose, you know? Well, the other thing they found inside his van was a pair of bloody socks. So, strangely, it didn't take long for him to start spilling his guts to the New York State troopers. And this is another part of these cases that's just there's so many aspects of this stuff that's fascinating, and you have to try to understand why are they doing this. And this is the problem with police, I think, hunting monsters now, is they don't understand these very guys well, because they're difficult to understand. Their minds aren't built like normal minds, and so you really can't track them down like you would an ordinary thief. So he started confessing to raping kids by the dozens and gave specifics on I think at least a dozen cases. Well, word got back to Providence, Rhode Island, because that's where Wayne Chapman actually lived. And assigned to the case was Detective Al Mintz. And so Al Mintz went to Wayne's apartment and searched through the garbage. Inside the garbage, what he found was a bunch of gas station receipts that showed that Wayne was traveling all around. Just want to take a pause here for a second to remind everybody. So this was supposed to be live with Al Mintz, but YouTube made us wait 24 hours in order to hook up with StreamYard. So it's been postponed till tomorrow night. As far as like Turtle Boy was wondering about the big announcement was that there was going to be an interview. I hope I didn't deceive anybody. There wasn't going to be a big announcement on the Karen Read case. I did talk about the Karen Read case today because I had a little bit of inside information. Again, I don't want to mention any. I talked about it in that episode. I don't want to mention any names. I'd like to talk to Turtle Boy on the side and exchange some information. This comes from a law enforcement source that's very close to the main players involved. That doesn't mean he knows anything, because what he's getting is basically the rumors that are sweeping through the police. But he has specific names, some really new information that has not been reported on Turtle Boy's page yet. I just don't want to report it here. I talked about it a little bit indirectly in that earlier today. So, it involved a former law enforcement official who now works as basically a private investigator that subs out just to law enforcement agencies or DA's offices. And Turtle Boy might already even know something about this on his own on the side, but I'd rather exchange notes. I don't want to say it. So let me just get back to Al Mintz in that whole case. So Al, to me, is a hero. The reason I consider him a hero in this story is because we know that most cops are good cops, but they're human beings. In addition to wanting to solve cases and bring justice, they have their own personal ambitions. And police agencies have tremendous rivalries with each other. The FBI notoriously hates the state police, and they don't work together. So even within departments, the homicide they don't want to be scooped by Vice. Well, Al understood the seriousness of what was going on with these pedophiles that were ranging around a wide area, certainly in New England, but also one of the other monsters in this case who was connected to Chapman and Barjona was a guy named Charlie Pierce, who worked as a carny, and for about 20 or 30 years was traveling around from Florida to Chicago to New England. He was born in Haverhill, which is right next to Lawrence. And his particular penchant was he didn't care if it was a boy or a girl, but he would abduct them, kill them, and have sex with the corpse. He wanted to have sex with the corpses. But this guy was another 6'5", strong enough to, and when the girl that he was convicted of killing, he lifted a 99-pound boulder and put it on her body. It's just a strong, monstrous looking dude. I'll throw pictures up on this video tomorrow so you guys can. I'm sorry, I won't be able to do it on this one, but I've thrown it up on other ones. Just a monster. And he also was a pen pal of Wayne and worked closely with them. So Al was starting to look at these cases and saying there's a connection to them. And he contacted, for instance, a big one was in Brockton. David Lewison went missing, and that case remains unsolved. It's one of the stranger cases because 6 years after he went missing, David Lewison was found in a steamer trunk inside the basement of an abandoned building. But the building had not been abandoned, according to Dave's research, the building had not been abandoned at the time when David Lewison went missing, which means somebody had moved that body. I mean, it's unlikely the building was occupied, so somebody didn't leave that body in that steamer trunk in there because the smell would have drawn attention. So somebody moved that there later. Also, a year later, this beautiful girl, 10 years old, Denise Cochran, was also taken in the same town, Brockton, and her body was found in a different container in what's described as a transformer case inside a steel yard. It's also completely unsolved. So the part that we want to find out about this case is whether there are accomplices and whether they were using their particular fantasy life to sell porn, to basically pursue their own fantasies with this stuff and then sell porn. It seems crazy to me, but yet there is evidence there that this might have been going on. So, for instance, in the Andy Puglisi case, Wayne was convicted of raping these two boys in the woods the year before. So once they captured Wayne, the boys testified, yes, this was him. But they also testified that inside the woods, they heard cameras clicking and they heard rustling in the bushes. So they were face down and couldn't see much, but they believed that there was someone else there with them. And then also in the Andy Puglisi story, if you watch Melanie's documentary, which is on HBO, and I recommend it, it's called Have You Seen Andy? And she won an Emmy for it, which I'm really proud of because she's from Lawrence. But one of the things that went on, so this kid, Ray, who was 4 years old when Andy went missing. Well, when he was 10, he came out and he claimed that he was with Andy that day when he went missing. And he said what happened was somebody came and said, "Can you help me find my lost dog?" And so Andy and Ray, who was 4, Andy was 10, went with this guy into the woods. And when you go out there, you have to when you get to the edge of the woods, you walk down a pretty steep hill to get into what's a swamp level layer of wood. So it's surrounded by hills. That's why it creates this very isolated effect. So according to Ray, when they got down there, they were walking on the path with the guy who probably is Wayne Chapman when they saw 2 other guys waiting for them ahead. And Andy somehow knew what was up, and he turned around and they started running back up the hill. And Ray, who was only 4, was having a hard time getting up the hill. So if this story is true, Andy died a hero because he stayed behind Ray and was pushing him up the hill. And he kind of got him up to the top of the hill when somebody grabbed Andy and pulled him back down the hill. And Ray kept going. And at some point he got up. There's like a next hill a little bit further on. It's a grassy hill that's right near the pool. It's in sight of the pool, actually. So when he got up there, he looked back and looked down, and he could see, hey guys, hey J-Mon, he could see Andy getting assaulted by 3 men. So he cried out to try to get help from the pool, but at that point it was about 5:30, and there was either no one left at the pool or no one heard him. So when he ran back to the pool, his mother was just getting there, and he got in the car with his mother, and he was afraid to say anything. So he never told anybody this story until he was 10 years old. And then he never talked about it again. He was embarrassed by it. You can understand why. Until years later, Melanie found out about the story and got, hi Mary, and got in touch with him, and he agreed to actually go on camera. So if you watch that documentary, have you seen Andy? You'll see him on camera talking very emotionally about what happened. Now, I don't know if that's what happened, because you're talking about a 4-year-old kid, and it's very easy for false memories to get implanted there, to accidentally take shape. We can do a whole episode on that, and I think someday we will, because there's some famous cases right here in Massachusetts that are centered around false memories. So I don't know if it, so when I look at this stuff, at this evidence to me and all of it, I'm like, all right, that's intriguing, but not conclusive. And that's so far all that we're finding in just about everything that we look into here. So Al was assigned this, and he was kind of managing. He was helping the police in Lawrence with the Andy case. He was helping the police in Brockton with the David Lewison case. And then there was another case in Revere that seems to be possibly connected to this with Lee Savoy, which we talked about in the channel just briefly. Lee Savoy was a kid who in 1974 went out with his shoe shine kit to shine shoes to make some money at Suffolk Downs. He lived about a mile from Suffolk Downs, but strangely, he left his shoe shine kit at a restaurant before the track, right before the MBTA stop. He must have known the restaurant owner. Dave has talked to the restaurant owner, who's still alive. So Lee left his kit there and then went on to Suffolk Downs. So how is he making money at Suffolk Downs if he left his kit behind? Well, I think he was making money, because what happened was, and this became a huge national story reported in the New York Times in 1977. So after the Andy Bigwood, so 3 years after Savoy went missing, was it turns out there was a boy brothel basically being operated in the town of Revere. And ultimately it led to 24 indictments, but that was just the tip of the iceberg, according to the prosecutor. This was a huge sex ring that involved boys being brought in, and men could go there and pay money and end up with, and have sex with a boy. They were making porn, and the people were traveling from all around the country. There was and from New York, from the Bahamas even. So it was just crazy what was going on in there. There were also some very powerful people. There was a headmaster of an elite school near Boston. There was a psychologist, psychiatrist, a wealthy Harvard, independently wealthy skian that lived in New York. But the guy said there were people. So once the guy that owned the brothel, that owned the house, was arrested, he was cooperating, but he told the police there are certain names that I just can't give you. I'm sorry, my eyes are starting to bother me. So he said there were certain names that I just can't give you. And he also mentioned that if I do, there'll be a contract out on me. So again, you wonder if it's connected to the mafia, to the production of child porn. Now, when you start researching into well, first of all, the porn industry. The porn industry was completely dominated by the mafia. In particular, it was dominated by in the 70s, Roy DeMeo, but also this guy DiBinorno. I forget his name, but he was ultimately killed by Sammy the Bull. And also the Patriarca family in Providence was heavily involved. And Dave's going to talk about someone who some people are worried that I mention him on the air. I know Melanie is afraid to mention this name. She's worried that these guys are still active, but I think his name is Ken Guarino, and he might be connected to some of these cases. Dave also found a real break today. I don't know if he's going to get mad at me for saying this. Let's just say he found out about a store owner yards from the crime scene where Andy went missing, who was convicted for selling child porn from the store, selling magazines and I don't know, maybe videos from the store. So the child porn industry was a real thing in the 70s, and these areas were hotbeds for it. I don't know anything about the generation of that stuff material, but I would imagine it kind of makes sense maybe to have some of these predators who that's their obsession say, all right, get together, film it. That's the thesis by both Melanie and Dave. They both arrived at it completely independently. Melanie has spent 25, 30 years looking at this evidence, talking to police. She's worked her ass off to keep some of these predators in jail, like Wayne Chapman when he was when he when his sentence was up. There were many times she had to go in and try to testify to get him to try to. She worked with the governor to try to make sure they kept this guy in jail. He eventually did get out a few years ago, and then he died. He was at that point he was too old and frail to harm anyone. But so she's done a ton of work on it, and then Dave has done. He's one of those guys that goes into anything and everything that's loosely connected to the case. He talks to people. I mean, he's been into places. I'm not going to tell his stories. He's going to have. He's got so much, and he's going to tell them on this channel and on. We'll also post these on the Yellow Tape podcast, which is going on the podcast, the larger podcast called Law Enforcement Today. That's on Spotify and Apple and stuff like that. But he gets into places that the cops can't get into. He gets it, because a cop. Most people, when they see a cop, they smell a cop, and they're not going to talk. Now, Dave's in law enforcement, but he's not a cop in that way. He's from Dorchester, had a very hard upbringing. He's a war hero that fought in Afghanistan. So I think he has a kind of a way about him that gets people to kind of trust him. So I think when he goes into some of these places like bathhouses and adult clubs and stuff like that, and spends a lot of time in there, it's not accurate to say he's undercover because he's not a cop in that way. He's in law enforcement, but he's not doing that as part of his job. So he's an investigator, and he's going in, he's giving people his real name, and he's not lying to me. He's saying, this is what I'm working on. He's just basically saying, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to get to the bottom of these cases. And I think there are a lot of people in those places that are gay men, but don't approve of any of that stuff that went on. So eventually, once they realize they can trust him, they work with him. So he gets a lot of information that other people can't get. And he doesn't always have it. I think he's sitting on such a pile of information, it's hard for him to get it organized. So we've signed up a researcher that's an expert. I just talked to her on the phone yesterday. She spent her life in research, and she's going to help with FOIA requests and looking over microfiches for old news articles and stuff like that. And I also talked to a friend, Tommy Daly. I can say his name. For an hour today. He is a retired Worcester detective, but he's still heavily involved in law enforcement because he's the vice president of one of the big police unions up here. Just got reelected. In case you're watching, congratulations again, Tommy. It was great talking to you today. I used to hang around with Tommy and be friends with him back in the Worcester days. So Tommy has a lot of contacts, all the contacts you'd ever want, not just with Massachusetts police or New England police, but also in Washington, because he's regularly going down there. So I think Tommy's going to be able to get us a lot of information. Dave is still on the cusp of breaking it. Melanie has told us that she has a lot of new information that she's kept under her hat. I think she's one of those people that kind of wants to be the one to break it. But when she starts working with anybody that works with Dave, Dave's going to get her to talk, because there's just something about Dave when you work with him. You trust him, and you can count on him. He's not screwing you. So you cooperate with him. And then in addition to that, at some point, I was surprised to see Turtle Boy on here, and he's not commenting, so he's probably not still with us. But we do think that if we can get this organized, and especially if I can sit Dave down with Turtle Boy in the same room, preferably, so they can share notes, I think Turtle Boy can play a vital role in cracking what could be a case that is similar to the Catholic priest scandal that was exposed in the movie Spotlight. There are powerful institutions that seem to have been protecting these people and still are protecting these people. I don't know how deep it goes. I don't really know. Dave and Melanie both think it goes very deep, and I just don't know. I have to see more evidence to be completely convinced, but there are a lot of strange things. We talked earlier this week about, I talked just a few days ago about a series of cases that were very similar in Oakland County, Michigan, which is Detroit, and that's the county where Detroit is and the towns around it. And strangely, these cases also took place in exactly the same time, 76, 77. In this case, most of the kids, some of the kids went missing, but most of the kids their bodies were found. But something strange went on, because in every single one of the cases, the kids were kept up, they were taken, they were stalked for a period beforehand, So it wasn't like someone was just driving through and saw a kid and grabbed him. This is the same thing with the kids up here. These kids are targeted. They're selected days or weeks ahead of time. Andy Puglisi was targeted 2 days before. He brought him a Polaroid that's a stranger right in front of their house had taken a picture of him, some strange guy, and let him keep a copy. And that copy, that photo appears in Melanie's documentary. It's the last photo of him. And his mother has that. His mother's still alive. And it's just how terrible to think, but it's also a clue, And so the same thing with David Lewison. The guy who told the kids his name was Africa had been coming out of the woods for a couple of weeks and making contact with them. So these kids were slowly targeted. It seems to be a similar thing in Detroit. What was different in Detroit is that we know that they kept the kids alive, one of them for up to 19 days. They seem to have treated them fairly well, too. One of the kids, on his last day, 6 hours before, they fed him his favorite meal of Kentucky Fried Chicken. They must have found that in the autopsy. And also he was, I think he had a haircut and was groomed hours before he was killed. Now, why would you do that? The only reason I can think of is unless you were making a snuff film or something, or I don't know. I mean, it's terrible to I didn't think those things were real, so I don't know what's real. It's hard to talk about this stuff. But I do think there's definitely, when you start looking at the evidence that Dave has and that Melanie has, there's something going on. Now, how deep is it run and what is it? It's not just a matter of solving these cases, because most of these monsters are dead that were involved in the cases in the 70s. But if there were powerful institutions protecting this kind of commercial enterprise, combined with they're basically exploiting those predators who were driven by their own crazy desires, why wouldn't it still be going on now? Yes, those particular monsters are dead, but those institutions that were capitalizing on them are not. And the people that are still attracted to that kind of thing are always going to be with us. They're a certain percentage of the population. And nowadays, by now, and everybody is smart. Even the dumbest predator is smart enough, I think, not to put things online. So my guess is that if you're organized, these kind of guys are probably kind of going back to the time before the internet and operating one-on-one, kind of like they were in the 70s. So I don't know. But just to finish up, and I'm going to look to see if there's any questions, but just to finish up, Al Mintz will be on tomorrow. This guy, to me, is a hero because he wasn't trying to seek a promotion. He was trying to solve these cases, trying to help other police departments solve these cases, and was very energetically doing this. I mean, he was in Providence, and he's trying to help out cities in Massachusetts. So a lot of people will criticize cops, and there's nothing worse than a bad cop. But I think the overwhelming majority of cops are really good cops, and some of them are particularly heroic, like this guy. And also even the state trooper in New York, if he wasn't so alert and had pulled this guy over and got him to talk, some of these guys are just out there really doing their job, and they are protecting us, and they are protecting our kids. And so that has to be applauded. Now, unfortunately, Al Mintz had to leave law enforcement after 8 years, not in controversy. He just quit. And the reason was, we'll find out more tomorrow, was corruption in the Providence Police Department. And there was a lot of pressure on him to stop these investigations. So we want to find out why. And obviously we know Providence is a center for organized crime. And at that time, the Patriarca family, that's where they were headquartered, which they ran organized crime in New England. So was it pressure from organized crime through their police connections to get Al Mintz to stop pursuing these cases, or was it something else? Whatever it was bad enough to get Al to quit and leave law enforcement as a still young man forever. I don't know what he did with the rest of his life. God bless him. He's still alive. His mind is still there. He's still willing to talk about. He's been on many documentaries before, because it's not, I don't think it's that he loves being on a camera. I think it's that these cases still eat at him, because he knows that there was, in many ways, most of them remain unsolved, even though he may have in his idea a very strong idea of who the killers were, or who the predators were, certainly who the monsters were. So let me just look at the questions, see if anybody's got anything good. BL says terrible. I don't know. He could be talking about my voice. He could be talking about my eyes. Or he could be talking about just the cases that we're talking about here. Hopefully, he or she, BL could be a she too. Mary, hi, good to see you as always. Boys should never be ashamed to be. Yeah, I mean, and that's you. But you know what, Jaymond, that's true. But how how it's embarrassing. So I'm sure for everyone that talks about what's happened to them, there's probably dozens that are just afraid to. And some of these kids end up broke and they never end up right for the rest of their lives. And I know now Dave has had to have tremendous courage to come out and talk about this and to face this with his own life. And he went through a huge struggle as a young man, but he's come out heroically because now he doesn't drink. He lives a clean life. He's a father. He's got 2 kids. He's got a really cute. I haven't really seen one of them only came on for a glimpse, but the youngest one, Connor, came on. He's a real ham. He likes to lead on the camera. His wife's a nurse, so he's doing very well. But he's obsessed with these cases because he wants to bring justice to these monsters. Because when he was abused, the guys there were multiple guys that abused him, and the guys that did abuse him were of the age that they probably knew some of these monsters that we're going to be investigating. So it has a very personal angle for him. I know I don't want to speak for Melanie. She has a personal angle too. It, I think maybe goes a little bit beyond her connection to Andy, but hopefully someday she'll come on here and tell us about it. Thanks, BL. See, Benjamin John, always good to have him. He always sounds like a lawyer. I don't know if he really is. He's just really smart. Everything is connected when it comes to traffic. Yeah, I mean, you got to be so careful not to, with any conspiracy theory, not to connect dots in a way that is just a fantasy. But there's definitely something going on, and the people that pursue this kind of thing have to know that they have to know that they're the most monstrous people in the world, and yet they can't really stop their desire to do this. So I think they're obviously very careful to stay underground. And some of the people that are involved in this are extremely wealthy, extremely powerful, extremely connected. That's what we see in these cases in the 70s. These guys, another one was a doctor from Connecticut who was like the chief of endocrinology, and most of his work was working with pediatrics. He was in that position for, I don't know, 30 years. And he also was connected to a priest who was caught in New York City distributing child porn, selling child porn. And so this priest got caught, became a cooperator, led to some convictions, but it's all very secret, hush hush. So we need to. Oh, Turtle Boy's going on at 9. All right, thanks, Thomas. Good to see. Gina, should I keep them off or put them on? I start blinking eventually from these. I have these spotlights that you have to use in this. Come on, I live in a yellow cottage. It's pretty dark out here. So, but I will. I occasionally have to put it back on. But at least I have realized, and I'm not a cyborg. Why the fuck is that a heart? I don't know what that means, Tom. Tom's one of my best friends. He's a broadcaster. He lives down in North Carolina, but he's originally from Worcester, so he knows a lot of these cases too. He's I think he's in his early 50s. Is that classified, Tom? But so he would remember some of these cases too. He certainly remembers someone like Bar Jonah, which is one of the more awful monsters. I think probably Joe Mitchell, if he's still here, would remember that too. So, Gina, should I put the shades back on? So I didn't even realize Turtle was going on. See, what I got to figure out, I tried to figure this out the other night, and I hope people didn't get a false update, but I want to be able to work this with OBS. Dave's better at that, so he can help me figure it out. That way, if somebody says, Kev, I have something I want to talk to you about that I can bring them on and we can all listen to it. So let's say Gina wanted to come on and say, Kevin, I got a great lead. And we're doing live, and we would be able to connect to her just like in a Zoom meeting and bring her on, and she could tell us what she has. That's what we need to really, really be able to figure out how to do, because otherwise it's just me talking to you guys, and that'll get old really fast. But I don't know if should I try to stay on, and I would love to stay on until Turtle Boy comes on, because it's a nice segue into that. But I don't know if I have enough stuff to talk about for 25 minutes. That's why I wish I could have one of you guys come on and do it with me. So Benjamin, what are some of the connections that you're thinking about? New reaction button on YouTube. I don't know if Benjamin is still here. Benjamin, what are some of the connections or conspiracy you're thinking might be going on involved this? I know you've talked about the border, and I personally think that right now, the most massive child trafficking machine experience is going on right now. It's not intentionally created. I don't want to get, this is not meant to be political, but it has been created by the Biden administration. And here's exactly how and why it happened. So, under the Obama administration, they tried to have a more compassionate approach to the border, which I understand. I'm pro immigration. So I'm not, his heart was in the right place. But what they did though was they made it so that if illegals cross the border and they have a child with them, instead of kicking them back into Mexico, they let them through and they give them a court date and say, "Come, all right, so come up here," and which they never show up for. So what happened was that the cartels figured this out pretty quick, and they said, "Okay, so if you're paying a cartel, or if you're part of a cartel, and you're trying to traffic across the border regularly, or you just want passage into the United States, they tell you, hey, for an extra whatever $1,000, we'll give you a kid, and that kid will get you through. They won't send you back." So suddenly, kids became a very valuable commodity. This happened under the Obama administration. So what was happening is, so Border Patrol figured this out because all of a sudden, a lot of kids started showing up at the border, and they knew these kids were in a bad situation. They didn't belong to the families they were with. In some cases, they were with drug traffickers. So to protect the kids, they started pulling them away once they brought everybody into custody until they could verify that the kid was with his own family, his or her own family. And but as the trickle at the border became a flood, what happened was they couldn't keep up with that verification process. So they had nowhere to put the kids. So they built these large facilities and had all these kids sleeping on mats behind iron bars. And conservative media put this, showed pictures of this and described it as kids in cages, which it kind of was. But the regular media ignored this. Then Trump was elected. Well, the policy was continuing. Trump was trying to figure out how to stop this, but he didn't know how. And so these kids were still coming across the border and they were still put in those same facilities. And all of a sudden, people like AOC and the media discovered kids in cages, even though it had been going on since before Trump took office. So that's how the media rolls, right? So now all of a sudden, this was getting laid at Trump's feet. And I'm not defending Trump on a million other things. I'm just explaining this is how it went down. So eventually, Trump clamped down on the border by getting Mexico to stop people from getting to the border. So that slowed things down to a trickle again. But then when when Biden came in, right or wrong, people all across Latin America got the impression that the border was open. So they started showing up in massive armies. Well, this became something that cost. Hey, Dave, this is something that became something that cost Biden politically. They were worried about it because all of a sudden, so first they tried to keep the media and cameras away from the border. They didn't want, because they knew that the thing that would kill them would be pictures of kids in cages or masses of kids. So for months, they succeeded in keeping the media away. And then ironically, it was a Democrat congressman. I can't remember his name, but he's an Hispanic guy. So he was worried about what was going on. So he went to visit the border. They couldn't deny him because he was a congressman, and he took pictures and smuggled them out. And so then once those pictures leaked, then the Biden administration couldn't no longer hide it anymore. So they let the media in. But now they had a new problem. How are we going to stop this? What they worried, their biggest worry was the images, because the images were so damaging politically. So his instructions were to his Homeland Security was, I don't care what you do, but stop this problem. Make sure there were no pictures like that. So what is Homeland Security supposed to do? They have these policies where they're basically letting people through. They're not sending them back. But at the same time, now they have all these kids piling up. So they had tens of thousands. Hey, Joe, I'm gonna check that out in a second. So now all of a sudden they got to the point where there were thousands of kids in these facilities. They just couldn't keep up because a flood had become a deluge. And so under that political pressure, they came up with a new system. They basically, well, they expanded on an older system. So if you had a kid that was there and they could connect to a family in Ohio, and that family would say, yeah, that's our son. All you had to do, that family had to do was sign a document saying that was their son. And so you would send it out. Now, earlier on, there was protections. So they had to do DNA testing, but that took too long. So all you had to do was sign the document. But so obviously that could have been someone just pretending it could have been a child trafficker for sexual reasons, or it could have been someone looking for cheap child labor. But it gets even worse, because then what happened was they were so desperate to move these kids out of there that what they started doing was signing the kids over to groups and organizations that would unseedy reputations, basically people that ran farms and other bad industrial processes inside the United States that were looking for cheap labor. And so thousands and thousands of kids have come across the border, and because of the process created by the Biden administration, there's no way to deny this. These kids have been sent into child labor, into slave labor, where they'll grow up in horrific conditions, mistreated, uncared for, no health care. And if somebody wants to pay money to do something worse with these kids, there's nothing to stop them. And certainly the FBI is not looking into it. The FBI is, well, you know what the FBI is looking into, and it's not that. So I don't know about any other crazier conspiracies. I certainly don't think anybody in the Biden administration said, boy, let's make some money trafficking children. No, of course not. It's not like that. But it's kind of a cynical thing where they say, listen, just get these kids out of that facility and do it in a way. And as this gets passed down, administrators don't know what to do. So they're like, all right, someone's signing for the kids, and they just ship them off. And that's what's happening. They're all getting shipped out. So yes, here's the deal. Yes, I am a screenwriter. I am an author, but I'm unpublished. I finished a novel a few years ago, and that's one of the reasons I started getting into this podcasting deal. And I don't know how to say this, because I don't feel any vindictiveness for this. But the time that I started trying to break in as an author was not the time when publishers had any interest in white middle-aged male authors. It just isn't. If you look at it, it's just not what they want. And doors were open for me at different times in my life. Sometimes I took advantage, many times I didn't. I don't say that to be vindictive. I'm just like, I just realize it's not something that I can pursue, because for a publisher to sign someone on, it's a commitment to them for a long time to grow with them. The first book often fails, or the first book may be critically well received, but doesn't make any money. So it's a very, very difficult industry. So when an agent or a publisher takes you on, they're developing a long-term relationship with you. They can only handle a certain amount of those. So it's not just about whether they like your book or whether they think your book can make money. They can only handle X amount of those. And a lot of agents and publishers don't get paid much money either. And so these guys, over the last 5 years, they're just not looking for people like me. So I don't think I could have written the next Harry Potter. And I'm not saying I'm not good. I'm just saying I had no chance. And I realized that. I have had some luck with some screenplays, nothing that's been produced. I just had one today. An actor contacted me. This is one I co-wrote with my frequent partner, Dina McKinnon, down in Florida. It's called Saving Fitzgerald. This actor's name is, I forget, I gotta look it up, Michael something. He's got a pretty good, he was actually, this guy was interesting. Is it almost time for Turtle yet? Oh, this guy was interesting. No, when I looked at his resume, I couldn't help thinking that of those old beer commercials, the most interesting man in the world. This guy started out as a race car driver, a motorcycle driver. He won a couple of international motorcycle races. This must have been back in like the 60s or 50s even. He's an older guy. So then he was a stuntman, and then he decided to calm down and he went to law school. He's from Oklahoma. He became a lawyer. He worked for the prosecution in Oklahoma. And he, I don't know, he won like Lawyer of the Year or some kind of national award for it. had spent his whole life as a prosecutor and then retired as a prosecutor, but this guy wasn't done because he's the most interesting man in the world. So he decided to become an actor. And he's got about 20 solid credits to his name for TV show. He's not a star, but he's got legitimate things in TV shows and movies and stuff that if you look at his list, you say, hey, I recognize those, you know. So I think he's about 80 years old now. Really, really handsome looking, debonair kind of guy. And the clips, he looks very good too. Very well spoken guy, you know, rugged, athletic guy. So I mentioned, he contacted me about something else, and I mentioned to him, we have this script, Saving Fitzgerald. It's a character's his age. It's about a guy who's he was an internationally renowned art thief. He's a fugitive on the law. When he gets, as a younger man, he meets someone who's straight and he gets married, kind of like in the movie Unforgiven. And he's under a different identity now, and he goes completely clean. And she has no idea. She has no idea that he's a famous thief. And she goes through a normal life with him for 30 years. They have children. Well, then so the story picks up at the beginning. He goes into a neighbor's house. It's a wealthy house, breaks into it, breaking the alarm system, is in the process of stealing a very valuable painting when everybody wakes up. And the kids know him as like basically like a grandfather because he lives next door and they're all friendly to him. And they let him go because it turns out he's in early stages of Alzheimer's, of dementia. So, but then the police come from the next day because they find out that his real identity and that he was a fugitive from prison. So he's sent by a judge back to prison, but to a medical hospital because of his condition with dementia. Now, his wife is basically struggling with the reality that this guy was not at all who I thought I'd been married to for the last 30 years. But in the end, she decides she wants to try to save him. But she goes to visit him in the medical ward and finds out that his mind is just really starting to go downhill more and more every day because now he's wasting away inside basically a prison cell inside a hospital. So she's the goody girl, but she's never committed a crime in her life, but she conceives to break him out of the prison hospital that he's in and then launch a whole caper to steal some kind of an art theft caper. And so me and Tina wrote this. It's a funny story. And as soon as we saw the picture of Fitz, what's his name? I think it's Michael Gussman. Let me see if I signed under a different email. I think it was Michael Gussman. Something like that. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to post it up later. I can't find it at the moment. But so he likes the part. He read the script. He loves it. And he's going to take it to his agent and shop it around and see if he can get a producer or a director attached to it, because that's really what you need. These are all long shots. The 2 scripts that we've sold for a decent amount of money have not been produced. And that's the way it is in the business. You'll sell a script. We sold one for $6,000. I'm embarrassed to even tell you guys what it was called. It was called Cougar Camp. You can probably kind of guess what it was about. It's a funny story. We thought maybe, oh God, I can't think of the actress's name. The heavy actress that's in all the comedies. She was in one with Sandra Bullock called The Heat. I can't think of her name, but she's a riot. And we thought she'd be perfect for it. So, but we don't have the kind of connections. No, it wasn't about cats. It's about cougars. Anyways, it was a funny script. It was a little bit over the top in places, and so the woman that bought it from us does a lot of stuff for HBO, but so far she hasn't got it out. And the other one we had out was called Doggone, and that one is about a suicidal guy who is interrupted in his suicide by a stray dog that kind of ruins his suicide and follows him home. He wants nothing to do with the dog, but the dog won't leave. And, that kind of story. It's a comedy. And through the dog, he has to recapture his desire to live again. He's not an older guy. He's only like in his early 30s or something like that, which I consider to be young. But 10 more minutes till Turtle. So I'm going to hold you here and throw you Turtle's way. So what do you guys think of Turtle? Anybody have any opinions on Turtle? I know Benjamin John, I've seen over there on Turtle's site. Thomas Fleming was one of the guys that first told me about Turtle many years ago. So I know Thomas follows him. Joe Mitchell, I don't know. I'm going to say Joe. I know. You know what? I just remembered Joe's politics, and I don't think Joe's politics would align very well with Turtle Boys. So, but maybe he's become a little more conservative over the years. I worry he's going to cross the line and get screwed, but he seems to be careful. Yeah, I mean, I think he's not a lawyer, but he plays one on his blog. I mean, he's aware of all the legal issues, so I think he kind of knows. I think he got into trouble in the past by not being fully aware of them, and now he has a much better sense of them, so he knows where he can go and where he can't. Unlike Donald Trump, who has no sense. But my liberal friends think I'm conservative. Well, see, that's what happens, Joe. You get a little older and you become a little bit more conservative. So, because that's how I've always been. My liberal friends thought I was conservative. My conservative friends thought I was liberal. But I definitely remember Joe as pretty liberal, pretty far off to the left. But I think a lot of people are in their youth. Even I was pretty liberal in my youth, because things make a lot of sense to you. A lot of theories on the left. Melissa McCarthy, that's the name. Thank you. Here's the deal. Yeah. Are you a screenwriter? Here's the deal. You can type it in down there. I wish we could pop you in and you could talk to us. But so the guy that I'm not going to say his name. I'm being very careful, but the person who was feeding me information earlier today on the Karen Reed story, who is in law enforcement and is not Dave McGrath and is not Tommy Daly, two other cops that I've talked about. I just want to be clear. It's not those guys. It's someone else. He also is a screenwriter, but maybe I'm giving away too many clues. But he's a great guy, and he's into true crime, and he's can talk about a lot of these cases forever. I won't mention too many specifics because that would give him away. But he wants to start his own podcast soon, and I totally encourage him to. Tommy Daly is thinking about starting a podcast with other cops and retired cops that are connected to the police union. So I watch a podcast that involves former New York City homicide detectives, and it's funny because it's a good show, but it's kind of fun. There's four of them usually on, sometimes three, and I can't quite remember the name of it. But it's funny because they go frequently on the shows with the mafia guys, and the mafia guys go on their show, which makes sense because what they're doing is trying to connect each other's audience. But it's funny because they're legitimately friendly on these shows. These guys, they talk suddenly very well about each other. So, and they were completely on the opposite sides of the fence. And some of the cops that are on this were the ones that locked up the other guys too. And I think that's probably how you become friends. You take a guy and you lock him up. He's living that life, but maybe you make a connection and you realize there are parts of him that are not a bad guy. Yeah. Oh yeah. J-Mun watches that too. What's the name of that, J-Mun? What is the name of that one? And there's one of those New York cops that has been, he's a boxer, was into boxing, and he's been chasing down he spent his career chasing down the mafia, and he's on a lot of those shows. He's good. Yeah. Benjamin, about talking about Turtle Boy. I mean, it's entertaining, and he's breaking shit that wouldn't get broken without him. So I don't know, we all have to have our own way. I couldn't do things the way Turtle Boy doesn't. I mean, maybe I don't have the balls, I'd be chasing down people down the sidewalk and stuff like that. But I just couldn't do things like going to a kid's soccer game and stuff like that. I couldn't do that, because the kids got to be aware of it, So I wouldn't be able to do it. But I'm glad we have a Turtle Boy. I'm glad he does what he does, because even if he maybe crosses the line sometimes, he is breaking stories that would not be broken without him. There is no way the Boston Globe or Channel 5 is ever going to cross a story that goes against the power structure here. They're just not going to. They're deeply connected with the dominant political party here and all the major players in it, plugged into all law enforcement and all the big companies. It's all kind of one team, one pretty close to one ideology. There's just no way they're going to do it. So, you know, Snopes Turtle was on earlier. We might have scared him off. I don't know. I took my glasses off, and that scares a lot of people off. But I did an announcement today. I wanted people to come on because we were going to interview a former Providence police detective, Al Mintz, and he's going to be on. He's going to be on tomorrow night instead. 7:06. We'll be on. We'll hopefully be on at 7, but officially we've been notified by YouTube that we'll be clear to start that show at 7:06. So we'll come on a little earlier if we can, but it might not be till, it might be that weird time of 7:06 that we start. But I think Turtle Boy might have thought that I had some big announcement, like a breakthrough about the case. And I apologize because I did not try to create that impression at all. Maybe I just didn't. Maybe it's the way I typed up the title. So I wasn't careful about that. So I'm sorry about that. I definitely would not want to mislead anybody. So the North Shore. Oh, where are you from? I'm not too far from you. In Andover now. I grew up in Lawrence. I had friends, college friends in Salem, in Beverly, in Peabody. So I spent a lot of time in those three towns there, especially Salem. Actually, I spent a lot of time in Salem. They got this great tradition there that's called the Parade of Horribles. I think it might even be on 4th of July. And it's just like a local neighborhood thing in this old neighborhood there where everybody serves drinks in their house. They open their doors, and everybody who's participating, the parade is just like guys with lawnmowers and kids with whatever. It's stupid, but it's meant to be. And at the end of the parade, people could go into anybody's house and have a drink that they're offering. It was a lot of fun. It's if they still have it, man, that was 30 years ago. So that was a great tradition. Benjamin's North Shore too. I don't know if you guys want to say where are you from on the North Shore, because you're not too far from me. Don't worry, I won't be hunting you down in your house or anything like that. So anyways, 8:58, we almost made it. Thanks, guys. I think now's probably a good point for me to let go, and everybody can go sign up to Turtle Boy. And anybody who's following this cases that I've been talking about, and check out my series Outer Demons. We're going to be starting a documentary. Tom Fleming who's on here, is going to be in charge of the filming part of it. That we're going to be filming our first footage in late July. Please go on there and make some comments, give it some reviews. But also, these cases, I think they're standing ready to be broke open, and I think Turtle Boy could play a big role. I want to get Dave and perhaps Melanie together with Turtle Boy, and if he gives it that turtle touch, I think more tips will flow in, and it'll get the exposure it needs. And I think these guys will break some of these really old cases. So thanks, Jaymon. I'll see you over there too. So when you guys are over there, every chance you get, tell Turtle Boy that you want him to go on Yellow Cottage Tales, or want Yellow Cottage Tales to go on with him, or get together with Dave McGrath. I don't really care how, as long as I don't care if they go on live. I don't care if we meet, get them together in the room. That would be cool too. Peabody. Oh yeah. My best friend was Martin Christopher. He was from Peabody. And that was a long time ago. But guys, thank you very much for being here. We'll see you over at the Turtle Boy shortly. I won't be in right away because I have to go grab something to drink.